Good afternoon. Welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gillow, the Director of Professional Development for the Brown School. Welcome to today's program. For those of you here on the Zoom webinar, just a reminder that we can't see or hear you, but we definitely do want to hear from you. The chat feature is enabled, and please do feel free to say hello, let us know your relationship to the school, let us know where you're joining us from. Also want to extend a special welcome to anybody joining on YouTube. We're delighted that you're with us, and also want to make you aware we're not able to moderate Q&A through YouTube today. So before we get started with today's program, I just want to share with you other things that are coming up in Open Classroom. It's a very busy week for us. We have programs running 4 days in a row. We'll be back on tomorrow morning with a program on child nutrition in the Kenyan context. Elizabeth Kamau is delivering a program that's part of our Africa Speak series. Then on Wednesday, in partnership with our colleagues at the International Center for Child Health and Development, we're doing a program on advancing scalability and impacts of a teacher training program for promoting child mental health in Ugandan primary schools. And then finally, on Thursday, November 11th, as part of our Artificial Intelligence in the Social Sciences series, we have a program called the Brutal, Beautiful Binary, Why the Problems of Artificial Intelligence Can't Be Solved by Artificial Intelligence. That's being delivered by Linnea Brumbaugh of the McKelvey School of Engineering here at WashU. So all kinds of stuff coming up, all of it free and open to absolutely everybody. We would love to have you come back. But for today's program, this is kind of a family meeting. This is about the Brown School Strategic Plan. And to kick us off, it's my honor to introduce Mary McKay, the Nydorf Family and Centene Corporation Dean of the Brown School. Mary?
Good. So thank you, Janet, and thank you, colleagues, for putting this panel together. I just want to welcome you, whether you're on Open Classroom, whether you're on YouTube, or whether you will see us in our electronic communications. Thank you for being so interested in our school and its future. And so you know, my job is really to kind of set the foundation for what my colleagues are going to talk about, which is our real serious ambitions over the next decade. And so what you'll see on this first slide is we have a very serious vision, mission, a set of guiding values that really have been part of the history and the fabric of our school, but articulated here that really our science, our teaching, our community partnerships are meant to improve our region, our nation, our globe, and that by coming together across disciplines, coming together across roles of faculty and staff and students, that we are really interested in engaging in activities that truly matter in terms of outcomes. And then Nancy, if you want to put up the next slide. So I'll just say a word about the kind of foundational areas of our strategic plan, and then you're going to hear from our colleagues about 4 of them today. But what you'll see on the bottom of this graphic is you'll see a set of core commitments, a set of areas that the Brown School historically has been committed to, have strength in it, whether that be equity, diversity, and inclusion, our partnership with our local community, our growing strength in global teaching and research, our transdisciplinary focus. And so those 4 areas, core commitments of our school, where we have existing strength and are deepening and building on those strengths over the next decade. And then up top in this graphic, you'll see a set of strategic priorities, areas that we are leaning into. And so last week we heard about the very big strategic goal of affordability of a Brown School education and our goal of meeting the full financial need of our graduate students in our master's and doctoral programs. Today you'll hear about data science. Environmental justice is another area that we are leaning into, as well as you'll hear from Sean today around community-driven science. And so we think about rigorous research in this area, transformative education, and really partnerships that drive the work in these priority areas, as well as propel us forward to make a bigger and bigger difference. So with that, I'm going to turn you over to a great moderator. Thank you, colleagues, for talking through these areas of our strategic plan. And I'm so grateful to each of you for your leadership in these areas, as well as your ability to collaborate together. So with that, Nancy, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Miller. I'm the Assistant Dean for Planning and Evaluation, and I direct the Brown School Evaluation Center. I'm also a co-lead along with Dean McKay and Jackie Pullen-Martinez for the school strategic planning effort, and I'm grateful to be your moderator today. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel, each of whom lead a strategic priority or core commitment that Dean McKay just introduced. So Professors Melissa Jonson-Reid and Fred Soamalia co-lead our core commitment of transdisciplinary research and education. Professor Patrick Fowler leads our strategic priority of data science and technology to advance the social good. And Assistant Dean Cynthia William leads our impact in, for, and with St. Louis, our core commitment. And then finally, Professor Sean Joe leads our strategic priority of community-driven science. Each panelist will briefly introduce their areas by addressing these three questions. We'll let each of our panelists present, and we'll save time near the end of the session to answer any questions that you may have. I encourage you to type your questions into the chat. So Melissa and Fred, I will turn it over to you.
So thank you so much. And we are so happy to be with you today. Fred and I will be tag teaming a bit as we go through our focus on transdisciplinary research and education. So you can go ahead and advance the next slide. So we thought we'd start just a bit with the word transdisciplinary, because we kind of throw out words like interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And now we have transdisciplinary. What does that all mean? Basically, it cross-cuts many of the priorities of our school. It is an approach to curriculum integration, which takes away boundaries from conventional disciplines and focuses on real-world problems. Similarly, transdisciplinary research is, again, efforts by investigators and also with the community that are working from within their own knowledge bases to come together around new conceptual, theoretical, methodological, and also translation to implementation approaches that again revolve around addressing a common problem. Go ahead and so we really believe this focus on transdisciplinary research and education cross-cuts our core areas, as well as our emphasis on working with community partnerships, data science, and the other major strategic initiatives. This is mostly because solving today's complex public health and social issues, whether it be child maltreatment, global poverty, and climate change, obesity, and others, requires solutions that transcend these single disciplines. We have to be able to prepare our future practitioners as well as our researchers to be able to draw on knowledge from and work in teams with others from whatever discipline is needed to solve the problem at hand, be it medicine, education, social work, public health, engineering, law, or others. This also means a commitment to engaging with our communities and our community stakeholders to assure that we design and implement preventative interventions at the policy and practice levels that are effective, culturally responsive, and lead to equitable, healthy outcomes. So some of our goals are to strengthen, as Mary mentioned, we already have initiatives focused on transdisciplinary science, but we believe we can go much further in developing our communication systems and training systems, not only across the 3 discipline programs that we house within the Brown School, but across the entire university to allow us to have nimble and effective approaches to problem solve these real world issues. This will also include building a leadership and administration structure that keeps these communication lines open, building upon our culture of collaboration to continue our work in the area of both teaching and research, and also feeding back our research into teaching. this means moving beyond some of the traditional collaborations across singular disciplines and really thinking about what do our graduate students and ultimately also our undergraduate students in the university need to be able to practice effectively in the real world today and in the future. And importantly, moving our scientific discovery that may evolve from this team approach into social impact by using the latest in communications and technology to disseminate not only to scientific audiences, but also to academics and our community partners so that we can problem solve together at the local, state, national, and global levels. And Fred, if you want to kick in with the global focus, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. And my name is Fred Sawamala again. So I think I just want to add to the last point that Melissa mentioned, which is the transdisciplinary in terms of thinking about policy, teaching, and research. And so thinking about transdisciplinary research and education, and the reason that Melissa and I are co-presenting together is because we believe that the lessons learned from in the classroom should be taken to the field, but also the lessons learned in the field should be brought back in the classroom. So that's why we are really co-presenting together. But also, we cannot think about transdisciplinary research without thinking about a global agenda. The world is very interconnected. There is a lot that we can learn from the poor sub-Saharan Africa, where I do most of my work, that can inform some interventions or lots of interventions in rural Missouri or even in St. Louis. So we want to be able to develop and implement a model of global scholarship and research for Brown School that builds around high impact priority areas and where collaborations are focused on impact. So we want to be able to collaborate with our colleagues on the globally, both in the low resourced countries, but also in the developed countries. But I also want to be able to enhance that integration of community engaged research, practice, and technology. And that's why, I'm always looking up to Patrick, because Patrick does a lot of work around data science. And really, at the end of the day, what you'll see in this presentation is that these slides are very connected, that really our equity agenda is very connected, and some of it may seem redundant or repetitive, but it's for a reason that it's repetitive, and it's repetitive because we believe in a transdisciplinary agenda. So within that agenda, we also want to be able to support the growth of multidisciplinary research focused on data and technology, and that's really Patrick's slide in a way or point, and he'll be able to talk more about that. But also we want to be able to ensure, in all that we do, to ensure that the faculty's transdisciplinary teaching and research is valued, evaluated, and supported. And right now, the school is putting in place a structure for us to be able to do that, both within the Melissa's portfolio, but also within the research portfolio, working with our colleagues in the Office of Research.
And I think maybe the last point I'd like to add to reach out to Cynthia and Shanjo presentations is that part of transdisciplinary research and education is also a value of deeply embedding with our partners in the community. And that also means that we need to be effectively disseminating information so that our community stakeholders are full partners, both bringing questions into the university as well as thinking about implementing what we are learning effectively in the field. So just echoing Fred's comments that these are deeply interconnected, and we are very, very excited about pursuing these agendas.
Thank you, Melissa and Fred. Patrick, I'll turn it over to you next.
Okay, Nancy, sorry. Thank you, Fred and Melissa, and thank you for really highlighting how much this strategic plan is interconnected, and you'll hear that throughout what I'm talking about. My name is Patrick Fowler. I am an associate professor in the Brown School. I direct our public health sciences PhD program, and I co-direct a new PhD program in computational and data sciences with colleagues from computer science, psychology, and political science. I am really excited to talk about our vision for leading locally, nationally, and globally to harness data science for equity and empowerment. We increasingly hear these buzzwords in the news. We hear artificial intelligence, we hear big data, we hear big tech, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, all aspects of an increasingly connected global society through data. Phenomenal advances in computing have given us new ways to collect information and to use information at a scale that I don't know when's the last time we've seen such a shift. At the same time, the new uses of information can also, we're susceptible to misuses in ways that undermine what we're trying to do, which is drive equity. Our goal at the Brown School, our strategic goal, is to serve as a hub for community engaged research and training that leverages the power of data science and the power of social science and community science. As I mentioned, we see the value. Like it or not, the age of data is upon us, and we are advancing well-being in meaningful ways. We've got mobile technology that allows more access to evidence-based interventions. We've got machine learning prediction algorithms that are enabling us to identify risk earlier and earlier, so that we can be more timely with our supports. Personalized health and personalized public health are thinking carefully about how best to intervene that meets the unique needs of the community, the person in front of you. And so we're using data to figure out more quickly what's going to work best. And all of this promises significant increases in the efficiency of our work, the impact of our work, in ways that we could maximize the resources that we're putting into driving equity. And we have challenges. As many wins that we see in the big data world, we're seeing cautionary tales. Data literacy is this idea that there are people who will be left behind in access to the tools and to the analyses that are driving some of these prediction machines. An especially troubling component is these same folks are the ones who are being disproportionately monitored through surveillance and are carrying the risks of these untested, in these systems that are unproven. We are very concerned about just the nature of big data, in that it's very opaque. These are complex algorithms working with lots and lots of information, and it is hard to understand what's going on. And the inability to see through some of the information that's being used, how it's being used, creates all sorts of opportunities for our longstanding racial economic biases to be not only perpetuated, but taken to a new scale. We see this in healthcare, we see this in housing, we see this in criminal sentencing, we see this in predictive policing. These are issues where our most vulnerable groups are being disproportionately burdened with the mistakes that we're trying to avoid. By bridging this technical and ethical components of data-driven science, we want the Brown School to lead in the area of responsible data use. Okay. Our vision is to work at the intersections, fits so well with transdisciplinary research, fits so well with community-driven research, research for St. Louis. We want to be at that place of shared knowing and shared creation. So our goals, we have 3 primary goals where we want to drive equity through data science. We're going to do that by deploying various multi-channel education and training in both the technical aspects of data science and the ethical aspects. We're targeting this in our Brown School classrooms, but also outside of our classrooms. And the learning is reciprocal. We are encouraging partnerships with collaborators who to be active participants in the design of these systems or the design of interventions into these systems. Our second goal is to create an open data infrastructure. We want the Brown School to create avenues for students, staff, faculty, administration to use data and to use it responsibly. We are building this on an open source framework, which is this information should be publicly available so that we can pull back the curtain and understand what information is being used and how. And finally, we want to create a transformational scholarship home, a living laboratory of working locally, nationally, globally on the design of responsible data systems. And I think thinking about why this, why now, it really builds on the Brown School's unique position for this type of work. We have the top ranked programs in social work, public health, and social policy. These are the fields that need to pick up this challenge of responsible data use. We have strong cross-campus collaborations around research and training with the various units and really strong partners in engineering and medicine elsewhere. And we are committed to community partnerships. This data, to unlock the potential of data science, it has to be in community. And this is something that we can build on. So our vision is to take what we have, our capabilities, and launch those into a place where the Brown School sits as a knowledge source, a convener, and a listener for the needs of data and technology in the next 10 years.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, Cynthia, I'm going to turn it over to you next.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay. My name is Cynthia D. Williams. I am the Assistant Dean for Community Partnerships for the Brown School. And first, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work, dedication of faculty, staff, and community members who are committed to advancing this key component of the Brown School's 2030 strategic plan. Further, I'd like to acknowledge Jenny Harpring and Jewel Stafford, the Evaluation Center staff, Dr. Sean Joe, and the Steering Committee for Community-Based Partnerships for their leadership in this core component of the strategic plan. This component of the Brown School's mission and strategic plan is to enhance the internal infrastructure of the Brown School to increase its presence, response, and impact in St. Louis through research, teaching, and service. The school's commitment to impact in, for, and with St. Louis actually began with the development of place-based and issue-specific community-based partnerships. This commitment was deepened significantly when the region experienced a social unrest propelled by the death of Michael Brown in August 2014. And now, consistent with the mission and vision of the Brown School, it is incumbent upon us as faculty, staff, and students to address in lockstep with other local initiatives and anchor institutions the disparities that the current pandemic has elevated, impacting the most vulnerable communities in our region. The totality of our planned initiatives will direct our academic resources for the benefit of individuals, organizations, and communities in specific priority areas, addressing systemic issues, structural inequalities, public health disparities, and racism within the school's geographic priority areas, which are North City, North County, South City, and East St. Louis. Next slide, please, Nancy. These objectives will be addressed through an organization to community model, which prioritizes mutually beneficial long-term partnerships with community-based organizations that have a proven track record of positive impact in the school's priority areas, that also value university and community expertise and capacity building while supporting faculty, staff, and students whose commitments are assessed and valued by partners. Would you move to the next slide, Nancy? So, looking at a couple of the goals and specific objectives, you can see that one of the objectives that our group has focused on is to build hiring and promotion standards that uphold and honor our pledge to impact St. Louis. The second objective in goal 2 is to blur the boundaries of who are the experts. That's on the academic as well as the community side. Next slide, please, Nancy. And finally, objective under goal 3 is to co-identify with community how to respond to meet the community needs and to honor community contributions, including educating students, adding input to Brown School programs and policies. The question I was also asked to address is, why now? I have a very simple, simplistic answer. It's high time. It's time for us to address it. It's high time for us to address it. And the next question is, what's innovative about our efforts? Well, in my opinion, what's innovative is that we have clarity of purpose and intentionality. We intend to pursue impactful change, build ideal partnerships, as well as inspire and support relevant, innovative projects that enable us to be agents of community change for the intent of creating healthy communities. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll turn it over to Dr. Joe.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sean?
I am here. All right, thank you very much, everyone. So at this point in time, we want to talk about community-driven science. So many of you might be thinking, well, what do we mean by community-driven science? So let me begin with a quote first from Nobel laureate Jane Addams. As many of you might know, again, really a steward of social work, particularly how it impacts community. And she said, the good we secure for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for all of us and incorporated into our common life. And when we think about community-driven science, we're thinking about solutions that cannot be developed in academic isolation. We're thinking about elevating community-driven scientific methods and studies as an important opportunity, not just for leadership, but for bringing about sustained change to complex social issues that tends to predominantly impact low-resource, poor communities over time. Next slide, please. So community-driven science must first begin with an idea of what is community science. And we're very excited that over the next 10 years at the Brown School, we'll be advancing a new area of scholarship that really builds upon existing areas of scholarship, but leaves us with better models to understand how do we impact or do community level intervention work, and how we do that in partnership with community to really advance equity. So our goals are stated here. What we're talking about overall is that this is a science that envisions a day when science and community collaborations are undertaken, and the goal is to make equitable population level impact. Let me say that again. Equitable population level impact that advance scholarship and social work's reputation as a source of evidence to inform policy and practice at local, state, national, or global levels. So this important work is being advanced here with our colleagues. And as you can tell from everything that you've heard, there is an intersection between all of this work. There is an overlap. So let me talk a little bit about our goals in the time that we have. One, to leverage and grow community-involved science resources at the Brown School that advances equity and eliminate disparities at any level, local to global, with a focus on, again, marginalized and low-resource communities. That means we must provide the internal infrastructure to support community-driven science as a protected place for faculty, staff, and the community to hold space. So again, we're talking about this long history of from action research that's been in the field to now community-driven science. And then how do we develop that? It's important that we also advance or evaluate faculty as well as residents as community-engaged citizens who can apply innovative and rigorous methods. So this is really more about the science of what we're doing. Because if we ought to be successful as a school, then we should be able to look around the community that we are part of and to see significant change primarily related to issues that have been chronic for a long time. So it's that kind of moment in time and space that we're taking as a school to say, this is going to be difficult work, courageous work. In fact, it could be audacious work, that we want to find ways to incentivize this kind of thinking among our colleagues, that both our staff and students are part of that process just as well as community is part of that process. So we want to incentivize ways through grants and awards to increase the communication, dissemination, the impact of our collaborative scientific work. Next slide. And then third, we want to advance this model of community-driven science to make equitable population level impact. So we are imagining as a school that we pick 1 to 2 major issues that we know represents chronic inequalities, persistent disparities in our nation. For instance, we can pick the economic earnings between black and white men. We can pick the infant mortality rate. We can pick these 2 major issues, and then as a school commit for the long term to be part of change, to be part of transformative change, that we as scholars are able to say, here's how we did it. Here's what matters. Here's the data that drove those decisions. Here's the best practices that are evidence-based that drove those decisions and brought about that change. How do we do that very, very difficult work, highly complex work that draws upon, again, the best we have in data science, the best that we have in transdisciplinary research, and to be able to say that we will be making population level impact? So we stand up because we're saying no school or university has ever taken on such a challenge. And we want to take on that challenge in the next 10 years. But that challenge builds naturally off of what we have done before. So this is not an exercise in just great aspirations. This is just a progression in good science. At the turn of the 20th century, the social work profession really got involved with this when it got involved with the Hull House movement and the beginning of paying attention to how neighborhood contexts really impact immigrants as they migrated, particularly from Western Europe, into the American context. And we paid attention then. We are at a similar moment here in the 21st century when we look at levels of immigration, we look at the levels of inequality, savage inequalities, as it once was called. And we're asking again, what sort of impactful, transformative, place-based work can we do? And more important, we don't want to see change for small groups. We think that's important. We want to see change at a population level. And imagine then this information, this science is then used to bring about inequality in different spaces and places across our country or even globally. We're very excited about that. So as we seek to do this, we want to advance the field of community-driven science through transdisciplinary curriculum development as well as practice. That means, how do we train our master's level students from social policy to public health or in social work to be a part of this process and change? How do we prepare them to be part of a workforce that requires them to have new skills in order to be in the agencies and the actors that's involved in this change? How do we train the next generation of scholars to be engaged in community-driven science that draws upon the best of our techniques to be a part of a process of bringing about change? We're very excited about this. We'll be spending the next 10 years as we're doing this work, advancing this sort of, as my colleague says, transformative sort of scholarship. And we look forward to partnership with our community members to actually achieve this goal. So we're very excited, and I believe that's my slides for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, well, so now I want to thank our panelists for introducing and highlighting each of their either strategic priorities or core commitment areas. Now we'd like to open it up and have some discussion. So please feel free to insert any questions you have in the chat, and I will kick us off. To all of our panelists, would like to hear about how the pandemic has influenced your respective areas, whether that's changed some things or you're applying learnings as we went through the last year and a half with the pandemic. Who would like to start?
I can start. So the pandemic exposed, as we all know, many of the disparities in healthcare access, access to voice, access to power, and data science was on both sides of this conversation, where we saw modeling being misused and we saw modeling being used for good. We saw technology connecting people in ways that were needed. We saw social movements continuing through web-based platforms. I think for us, it just emphasizes the need to really step into this place, because what we didn't see was enough conversation about how do we do this well, and that's where I think that the Brown School can lead moving forward.
Fred?
Yeah, so I do global work. I'm very much interested, of course, in research. And I think that people that at any one time, even when we are fighting terrorism or whatever, then at any one time in history, I think people just saw how interconnected the world is. How, the world was almost came to a standstill from a virus or a pandemic that we didn't know exactly where it came from, but all borders were closed. So we're able to kind of think about new ways of delivering curriculum. We didn't have, previously I used to travel to, different countries to be able to do this kind of research, the kind of research that I do. But for the past 2 years, I've not been able to travel, but at the same time, the research has been able to prosper, to do well. We have been able to do that. So which really means that there is a lot we can do globally because of the interconnectedness that we have from, of course, visiting the places is important, but there's a lot we can also do from Washington University itself, if we have the resources, if we have the connections that there is need. So we don't always have to go there. We need to go there sometimes, but we don't always have to go to these communities. And that there is a lot in terms of global and bidirectional learning, that there's a lot that we're able to learn from how countries were dealing with the pandemic in low-resource countries, in low-resource communities. What could we learn here in the US? And so really, COVID exposed a lot of challenges in terms of health and in terms of health, but it also exposed a lot of probably how resources could be used effectively or efficiently for some of us who are very much interested in both global work, but also the interdisciplinary nature of the work that we do.
Yeah. The other point I think I want to make around that, and again, it really signals why we're doing this sort of work, particularly community-driven work at this point in time. And the pandemic reminds us now that we have to do things at larger scale. And how do you do work at a larger scale? Particularly, again, here in the United States, as well as internationally, that for far too long, the chronicity of these issues, these very complex issues, we have not really sought to let our best science inform them. And more important, to be courageous together to say that we need to have bigger impact. It's really about impact at this point in time because, again, what was operating underneath in America was, again, further revealed as my colleagues made plain, but it says at this point, we got to find models of change. That how can you have a representative democracy that with this level of capitalist system, but again, eliminate some of the things that's been plaguing us for a long time as a country. So now we have to do things at greater scale. And that's going to be critically important. And I think the need is there. We know coming out of the pandemic, there's going to be much more concern around the behavioral health of not only our students, because we're beginning to see that, our children, but of adults as well. So again, we're going to need things that's operating at scale to start to eliminate some of these complex social problems and demonstrate models for how do you do that in other geographies across this country.
Thank you, Sean. Melissa?
So yeah, I'll just build on what others have said. I had the privilege of working with some of our schools on their pandemic plan, and it really highlighted the importance of sort of the bidirectionality of science, the need for both the ability to consume knowledge from different disciplines, bringing together medicine, education, what we know from virtual training, how we think about the psychology of students, how we think about the logistics of getting food to families in need who had it disrupted by the pandemic and the closing of the schools. And also just the idea of the enormous amount of processing of information that is needed. The idea of how do we track this? How do we understand this? How do we bring together science in the community? How do we disseminate what we know effectively so they can choose between what is the best science and available empirical stuff versus what is just a huge amount of flow of data and information that may or may not be the best science. So I think learning from that and taking those examples that we had all around us and then saying, now that we've been through this, how do we take those lessons and go forward and build those into models where we can help our community, be it whatever level of community that we serve, in moving forward to address ongoing public health challenges and social work challenges.
Right. Cynthia, so how, if a local agency would like to work more closely with the Brown School, what opportunities are there to engage?
There are multiple opportunities, Nancy. Thank you for the question. And that would begin in having a conversation with me over in community partnerships. That conversation in particular would talk about the specific area of need, where those individuals, the organization is located, as well as the time frame and resources that is needed to address the issue. So bottom line is call me, email me, to talk to me, and let's get a conversation started.
Thank you. And just another quick follow-up question for you, Cynthia. You mentioned about blurring the boundaries of who the experts are. And so we were wondering, give us one or two strategies of how that happens, how to make that happen.
Well, collaboration is key. How we blur the boundaries is having a clear and mutual understanding that everyone brings something to the table. Sometimes community feels as though academia feels that they're the experts and that's it. And the community feels because they have boots on the ground, they're the experts. So when we can acknowledge that both perspectives are correct and enter into agreement through collaboration, that's a formula for a big win. So that's the approach toward blurring that isolation and perspective about who is the expert.
Thank you. Patrick, there's a question around about the collaboration with others on campus, other campus partners that's going on regarding data science and technology, and if this is new or existing partnerships that are being built out.
They are newish. So about 5 years ago, the Brown School, in maybe even 6 years ago, engaged with our colleagues in computer science, who boast being one of the top 5 programs for artificial intelligence in the country, in the world, really. We developed a relationship that included the development of a PhD program where we are bringing students in who are interested in public health and social work and interested in data science. And as we were developing that, forming relationships, we expanded. So now we are working with folks in political science, folks with in sociology, folks across the Forest Park Divide, in the medical school, who are thinking carefully about the role of informatics and precision healthcare. So it's new-ish, but what's surprising just how early to the game we have been. This is a real new area of thinking critically about data science, and so we are in a really good place to take that to the next level.
Thank you. And for all our panelists, how does the Brown School's strategic plan relate and interface with the work being done at the university level and the planning process that's occurring there? Who'd like to kick us off? Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, sorry. Data science is an interest at the university level. Part of the strategic plan for the university is digital transformation. That is a significant investment in our computational and technology platforms that the Brown School will be part of, take advantage of, as well as shape. So what we want to do is make sure that WashU is not just doing big data, but doing responsible big data.
Just to add to Patrick, global research and global engagement is part of the Central WashU strategic plan. And we want to be able, as Brown School, be able to offer both complementary lessons, but also where needed, probably offer the leadership in that area. So WashU has realized that we cannot be a global university if we don't engage globally and we create structures that will be able to facilitate that. So it's part of the engagement within the strategic plan for the university.
Melissa.
Yeah, so there are bits and pieces of this at the university level. There is some really exciting interdisciplinary undergraduate programs in gerontology, to name just one. We have some classes in our own school called transdisciplinary problem solving that were designed to bring together people from different disciplines, but both the university as well as our school realize that there are some barriers that need to be taken down to really make these courses alive and integrative across all of our schools and departments. And so that's really sort of taking this next stage of working on the very good work that's been going on, but then taking it to the university level and saying, okay, what are the structures that need to change? What are the ways in which we make offerings transparent to students across disciplines so that they really get the preparation that they need to participate in community-driven and team-based implementation of solutions as well as research.
Similarly, community-driven science is part of the strategic plan. So I would only assume as we advance our work here at Brown, and as my colleagues mentioned, that again, the university has a commitment not only for but also in St. Louis. So if we cannot demonstrate what we're thinking about here, then it's hard to ask others to do it. So I would think it's good to see that it's a part of the plan. And again, our work doesn't always have to be at the population level scale. It also allows colleagues to do their own work that is informed by community priorities and involve community partners as well at any scale. But one of the most unique would be whether or not we can do some large projects here in St. Louis.
Cynthia?
Well, I'll just say that the Brown Schools Impact St. Louis expanded its language to include impact in, for, and with St. Louis, taking that directly from Chancellor Martin's initiative. And also, I'll just quote what he said in 2020, we must continue to do our part by utilizing our mission to make St. Louis a better and more equitable place for all to live. It lines right up with the Brown Schools strategic plan.
Okay, so one other question is, what's one thing that excites you the most about your area or the plan overall? We'll give you just a couple seconds to think about that.
I'll jump in on that, Nancy.
Go for
I
it.
love St. Louis. That's what makes me excited, that working in this area has really enhanced my hope for the region. Brown School, Washington University being an anchor partner, we have so many resources. It encourages me and others to hear that we just might be able to pull off everything in this region that we need to pull off. And that is to correct some historical wrongs and to have a brighter future for all residents. And that excites me very much.
Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, those of you, most people who know me know that I work in teams, so I value team science, but also people know that the work that I do, and most of the people that the work I do, you cannot do it as a single profession or a single field of social work. So some people don't know that I'm a trained social worker because I do work with economists, and some people don't know that I'm also a trained social worker because I work with public health experts. And so when you look at interdisciplinary being featured prominently in our strategic plan, but also at the university level, it's exciting to me that this is what I've done for the past, maybe 20 years of my life. And now this is really something that I continue to do, formally recognized within a strategic plan, working with medical doctors, with economists, with data scientists, with public health professionals, with social workers. I think really the nature of the problems that social work is supposed to tackle, being an eclectic field of study, it's not one profession that can really address it. I think we need the interdisciplinary nature or the interdisciplinary approach. And that to me is very exciting that we get to do that in a very interdisciplinary way, and we all get to learn from each other, but also contribute to the efforts to address many of these issues, including poverty, HIV, things that I work with, gender inequality, so yeah.
I think something that excites me is the idea that we're forging ahead with the idea that problems can be solved, that just because something's complex or difficult doesn't mean that we can't come together around pulling together the data science, the methodologies, the community partners, and the science across disciplines to really advance and make the world a better place. And I think that's the most exciting piece of this for me.
I'm often excited as when I see students who embrace such big ideas and big concepts and want to get involved. It really allows me to not only work a little harder, but to think that again, what new approaches and processes that we are able to identify, or new methodologies, that there's a generation that's not only curious but really interested and want to learn and want to contribute to that. So the idea of longevity of what we're doing is most promising through those examples.
Yeah, and I just say yes. I love St. Louis. I love working with my colleagues. I love working with the students, and it's just so important. This is a really interesting time in our world and our history, and we're driving towards equity, which is exactly what we need to be doing.
Okay, we're almost at time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time today. I just want to express my deepest gratitude to our panelists today. Your commitment, your drive, your excitement about the work that we've outlined and will be tackling in the 10 plus years ahead is very palpable. I also want to take an opportunity to thank our participants today for joining us and listening in and sending us your questions. There are opportunities to continue to engage with the ideas that you heard today, as well as in our first session around our plan. So on the screen, you'll see there is the recording from the October 27th open classroom that we did, as well as you can look at the full report of the strategic plan at our Brown School website. We're all thrilled to be on this journey and hope that you'll join us. And on behalf of Dean McKay, our faculty, staff, students, community partners, Jackie Martinez-Pullen, and many others, we want to thank you for joining us and look forward to working and collaborating with you in the days ahead and years ahead. So thank you so much and have a great day.